Overstandin, a Southern methodology. My talk is going to have 3 parts. My talk is going to have 3 parts. In the first part, I will talk a bit about, it's sort of a prelude only, the global south. What do we actually mean when we talk about the global south? Then we will talk, the main bit of the talk will be about overstanding and what that means. I'm sure we can talk about this for a very long time. And I will show you 2 examples of what I think overstanding is. And at the very end, I will talk a bit about methodology. Now, I'm not going to put those 3 things together in any coherent way. I hope that we have time after around 60 minutes of my talk that we can put all these things together, if that makes sense. Okay? Right. So I will begin, as I said, about the question of what and perhaps where is the global south. Then I will talk a bit about the etymologies of understanding, and I will get you involved as well. Then I will show you 2 examples of overstanding, KRS-One's famous song, Sound of the Police, and an interview that I collected in India by B-Boy MC AK, okay, which is about the naming of his B-Boy crew. And then at the very end, I will talk a bit about methodologies, and I will talk about epistemology and affectology as well. So methodology and epistemology are words that actually exist. Affectology, I made that up. Okay? But hopefully it makes sense to you. And maybe this is the beginning of a new word. All right. So we all know this picture, right? This is our beautiful planet. Can someone tell me where the global south is? Yeah.
Down?
Down.
Yep.
So this white bit down here?
Not the white bits.
How about that bit over there?
Continents covering parts of Africa, South America. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else?
There was this branch line drawn, which kind of divided, as a German geographical, he divided the world into the rich and the poor nations. It was called the Branch line. And it was kind of clear that most of the richer nations were in the north, and most of them, the poorer ones, in the south.
Okay, the Branch line. Okay, I've never heard about this. Thank you very much for informing me. Anyone else? Where's the global south? Yeah, please. Latin America? Caribbean? Okay. Yeah, okay.
For me, I define them as former colonies.
Former colonies, okay. So they're not...
This is the global south.
Is the global south in London?
No.
No.
And it's not in America.
It's not in America.
America was a former colony.
Okay. But America is a colony.
Former.
Former. But which colonies exist today? Everything is a former colony, right? So what makes America different, or the United States, I guess you mean, different from, let's say, Kenya or India? Barry?
Because their economy is more stronger. It's almost like sucking from the other economies of the world.
Okay. So, yep. So we started talking about geography, the Branch line. Then we started talking about colonialism. Now we start talking about economy, right? So these are like slightly different but interrelated concepts. Yeah, please?
Yeah, I'd say it's much good graphical and more tied to like any sort of economy because, for example, Australia is much more south than north, white people.
Right. Okay, so again, GDP and economic argument, okay? So let's see let's see how we can sort of categorize the world. On the very left-hand side, you see the famous TO map, which was first drawn by Isidorus, I think his name is, in the 7th century. He's a Spanish intellectual philosopher, and he came up with this map, okay? And that map is obviously not a geographical map, but it is sort of a biblical map in some ways, right? Which sort of connects with geography as well, but it's more conceptually, a conceptual map, okay? Rather than a real geography. Partly because they didn't know exactly the whole world, right? Back in the European Middle Ages. And then I left out a whole 450 years of European colonialism, of course. And in those maps that I don't show here, of course, the idea of the map was created by Europe. This desire to make a map, to dominate the world, of course. We first need to know what the world is in its essence, right? In the sort of the geography of it. Okay, so fast forward from 1500 to the so-called post-colonial era, or the post-war era, post-Second World War era. We arrive at this kind of dominant conceptualization, right? The first world in green, the second world in yellow, and the third world in red. And here we have, of course, the Cold War, the capitalist Western Bloc under the leadership of the United States, and the communist Soviet Bloc, Warsaw Pact under the leadership of the Soviet Union. And then we have, of course, as someone said earlier, the rest, right? The rest, which was basically the world that used to be colonized, and in 1945, many parts of those of this, what is seen in red over here, were still colonies. Okay, in fact, most of them, apart from maybe Latin America. Okay, so and then we have the fall of the wall, the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1990, and we get a new conceptualization of the world that is much more to do with GDP, economy, right? But it's still sort of the same thing if you look at it, right? So we have the capitalist West, including Australia and New Zealand, being sort of the developed countries, right? Or as some people call it, the overdeveloped countries. And then we have those so-called developing countries, right, in yellow. And then we've got the underdeveloped countries in red, right? So for those yellow countries, there is some hope. Maybe you can, at one point, get to the blue level, right, and become a developed country or an overdeveloped country. And of course, places like Japan, if you can see it over there, and Taiwan and Korea, have made this step into sort of developed countries in the early 90s. And soon the BRICS countries are going to follow perhaps, right? So that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And then at one point in that history, quite more recently, I guess, I've said 2008, but that's maybe not the right year over here. I don't think we can make a sort of a fixed, create a fixed boundary here. But now, at one point, we start talking about the North and the South. Perhaps only for politically correct reasons. Maybe it sounds a bit not so nice to talk about underdeveloped countries, or it sounds not so nice to talk about third world. So we now create a new term that is more sort of neutral, doesn't have all that baggage, and we talk about the global South. Now this map on the very right-hand side is taken from Wikipedia, so it's a quite authoritative source, or at least a very highly visited source. And over here we see that the global South is everything in red, right? And we see in some ways, again, a very similar distribution of the map. of the world, right? Now, what I want to say is that all of these attempts to conceptualize the world in these ways is part of what Marie-Louise Pratt has so beautifully called Europe's planetary consciousness. This is a European project, North America included. This is a European project in the sense that Europe has this desire to know the world, to understand the world, to make boundaries between countries, to make boundaries between regions, right? Divide and conquer. In some ways, to create economic dependencies, to create reasons for war and peace, and to manage global capitalism. All right. Now, the theorists who talk about the global south, the more, I would say, radical theorists, for instance, Santos, says actually, quote, the global south is not a geographical concept, even though the great majority of its populations live in countries of the southern hemisphere. The south is rather a metaphor for the human suffering caused by capitalism and colonialism on the global level, as well as it is a metaphor for the resistance to overcoming or minimizing such suffering. It is therefore an anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist, anti-patriarchal, anti-imperialist South. It is a South that also exists in the global North right here in this very room. We are in the global South right here. Right? Look around. In the form of excluded, silenced, and marginalized populations, such as undocumented migrants, the unemployed, ethnic and religious minorities, victims of sexism, homophobia, racism, and Islamophobia. So this is another understanding of the global south, right? That's nothing to do with geography anymore. It is a metaphor for suffering, and it is a metaphor for resisting that suffering. All right. We'll come back to all of this, hopefully, in the discussion, okay? Let's move, this was just a prelude, okay? Let's move into the main bit of my talk. Understanding. Overstanding. Could someone just tell me maybe, what is understanding? Could someone give me a reading of this word? What's that word? What's up with this word? What's happening here? Yeah, please.
I think we could explain it in a number of ways. One way to look at the term understanding would be like being able to come to the level of somebody so that you can stand with them.
Come to the level with someone so you can stand with them. You can stand. This is really my notes, yeah? With them. I love that. Thank you. Any other definition? Yeah.
Well, building on what was just said, we could like say it's you're standing under something, and that something could be like theory. So you place yourself under like a kind of theory, and it helps you like understand the word. So you build your word like on being under that.
Something like that?
Yeah. Something like that.
Okay. Any other suggestions? Yeah, Miguel.
Knowledge that is already out there,
Okay.
waiting for us to comprehend it.
Knowledge already out there, waiting for us to comprehend, yeah? Waiting for us to comprehend. That's lovely. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It's the ability to forget what we know in order to be able to connect with somebody else.
Wow, right. The ability to forget what we know.
In order to connect with somebody else.
You should write a book. Ability to forget. Ability to forget. To unlearn. Yeah, ability to forget so we can sort of, I love it. Yeah, Mingdam.
Not be solved or not be able to be solved. Solve problem, just understanding, stop and understand.
So not solving the problem or?
Yeah, or not able to solve the problem.
Not being able to solve the problem. Wow, I like it. Okay, not able to solve the problem. And you just accept what it is. Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
So, from my understanding, it's the effort that you have to do to reach the other side of the story.
The effort to reach the other side of the story. Yeah. Effort, reach other side. No. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I feel like there's no end of understanding.
No end.
Well, you can always keep learning, and there's no end. Read, you can say read on sudden soul.
Because you can always go deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. No end. It's so yeah. No ending. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
You need empathy.
Empathy. Empathy. Well, can you elaborate a bit? What do you mean?
In order to understand someone or something, or to even forget about what you know, you need to be able to put yourself in someone else's situation,
Yeah.
and also try to incorporate it into
Empathy. Okay, great. So we talked about a couple of meanings of the word and sort of.
There's a hand here.
Oh yeah, Romy.
The construction of others and the world around us.
Construction of others. Construction of others and world. Amazing. Can we? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's the feeling of completion, the feeling of grasping something and being able to explain it or describe it. But it's the feeling of being able.
Feeling of
Completion, I know.
of what?
Of being able to complete something, an object of reality.
Being able to complete something. Okay. I like it. Interesting that you say feeling. Because normally, like, people don't understand with their heart, right? They understand with their head.
Just that you feel.
Yeah, we got to come to that. Great. So what about, can someone like give me the sort of a reading of the different parts of the word? What's going on here? Yeah.
I mean, if you take metaphorically, then under is like inferior.
Uh-huh.
I feel like subject to an object.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? Barry.
I think what you just said, it's hit the nail on the head. It's like when you understand, it's like I can tell you something, and then you can, I can show you how to do something, and then you can do it. But then that is understanding the thing that I've just shown you. And I think you're going to get into understanding, which is what are you going to do yourself? It's like I'm going to show you how to draw a circle with a pencil, piece of paper. That's, you understand how to draw the circle.
Great.
But what are you going to do with the pencil and the paper? And I think that's the difference that I see.
Cool. We're going to come to that. Yeah.
It's continuous.
like you're not using it in the past tense, you're not saying you understand, understanding, so it's a continuous process.
Okay, it's a continuous process. Maybe that led to the colleague to talk about the infinite, what did she say? That it's never ending, yeah? Okay. Yeah.
I think it's like process, like under sitting on something instead of stand up. I think it's the process of stand. So
Yeah. So can I just show, by a show of hands, who thinks that the word under here has something to do with under in the sense of under something? Who thinks under means beneath? I should have asked the question in a different way. Who thinks under means something else than beneath? Okay. You might have read my papers. I'm not gonna. Okay. What do you think under means? You're looking it up.
Well, I look at the etymology.
Okay. No, sorry, I have to shut you down here. No. It's just like the digitally enhanced. We're going to come to the etymology in 1 second. Well, yeah. Did you want to say something? No? Under? Any other suggestions what under could mean?
Like becoming one with the idea. So we mentioned a lot of like pre-context and then after understanding, kind of just like being omni.
Becoming one. Okay. Yeah.
Becoming being deficient.
Deficient, okay, that's similar to inferior and under. Right?
knowing things about always without any help.
Okay, without any help. But yeah.
It can also mean like, for example, if you underestimate something, you're not really understanding it, so maybe, I know it sounds weird, but maybe you're not really comprehending that because you're under, not over, you're on different level, I don't know if you understand.
Yes. Okay, great. So, but there seems to be a general consensus that under here is used in the same way as other English words use under. So something like underachiever, underclass, German Untermensch, really horrible term. And so it has something to do with under, okay? Let's see if that is actually true. I will give you two etymologies, that is word histories. One by Rastafarians and the other one by professional linguists, philologists, right? Okay. So the first is the Rastafarians etymology. And they say very similar to what you say is the form, the word understand, which they call the Babylonian or the colonial metropolitan English form, means to stand under something, right? As we've had here, like theory, and someone is under that theory. And this implies a positionality of inferiority and passivity. This implication is very incorrect according to the Rastafarians, given that the word understand means to grasp something, to become familiar with something, to become knowledgeable of something. So actually the English word is sort of wrong. But the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, got it wrong. They must have got it confused. So what do the Rastafarians do? They switch that around and correct the English. They correct the English and make it into a Zionic word. And that is to overstand, which means to stand over something, implying a positionality of superiority and activeness. And in fact, if we look a bit closer into so-called Rasta talk, then we find not just the word overstanding being part of a general category of semantic inversions that are called overstandings. So there's a whole category of words which the Rastafarians call overstandings, and overstanding is one of them, right? So overstanding comes from understand. We have established this. But then there's words like downpress, which comes from oppress. Outformer, which comes from informer, in the sense of a snitch, right? Appreciate love comes from appreciate, right? We don't hate anyone if we appreciate someone. We love them. Should be appreciate love. Livicate instead of dedicate, right? If you dedicate something that's like hasn't got anything to do with death. Now, we can smirk and say, ha ha ha, yeah, the Rastas, they didn't get it right. The dead in dedicate is nothing to do with death, right? And so on. But still, that has a particular value in sort of emancipative post-colonial thought, because now you can free yourself from the colonizer's language. And Benjamin Slade, who studied these overstandings in a highly technical linguistic paper, says this, quote, an examination of overstandings shows that all the transformations involve flips of elements in binary oppositions, one negatively charged, one positively charged. It is the reformation along binary lines that constitutes the overstanding. But overstandings, despite their reliance on semantic oppositions, do not operate to create antonyms, that is, opposite meanings, but rather constitute corrective forms. As I said, they correct the English language with the same core meaning as their base. So overstand basically means the same as understand. Downpress means the same as oppress. It doesn't mean the opposite. That is, overstand, it says here, does not mean the opposite of understand, rather it corrects the putative negative connotations of understand. Right. As a little side note, just go off the track 1 second. Pierre Bourdieu, in his last book, Masculine Domination, gives us this wonderful diagram over here. You don't need to like read this in any detail. But what he says is quite interesting. I'll read it out to you. The division of sexual and other things and activities according to the opposition between male and female, while arbitrary, that is random, when taken in isolation, receives its objective and subjective necessity from its insertion into a system of, and I can't even say that word, homologous oppositions. Up, down, above, below, in front, behind, right, left, straight, curved, and twisted. Dry, wet, spicy, bland, light, dark, outside, public, inside, private, etc., which in some cases correspond to movements of the sexualized body, up, down, go down, inside, outside, go in, come out. Being similar, and this is now the important bit, I think, being similar in difference, these oppositions are sufficiently concordant, they make sense, they make enough sense to support one another in and through the inexhaustible play of practical transfers and metaphors, forget about that. And sufficiently divergent, they're different enough from each other to give each of them a kind of semantic thickness, a meaningful thickness, resulting from overdetermination by harmonics, connotations, and correspondences. Now, I think this is actually quite important because I think it really shows us how language, how we use language and conceptualize language to think about binaries in the world. And Bourdieu talks about male, female in particular in his book. Okay, let's go back to the professional, the experts etymology, right? The philologist sitting in a library somewhere in, I don't know, Oxford University or something like that. Over here they say, this is the etymology, actually you were all wrong. The Old English, the word understand comes from the Old English word understanden, to comprehend, grasp the idea of, receive from a word or words or from a sign the idea it is intended to convey, to view in a certain way. All of those things that we know understanding means. Probably literally stand in the midst of, from understanden to stand. Now, if that meaning is correct, they say, The under in understanding is not the usual word meaning beneath, but it comes from Old English, and I don't know how to say that, maybe someone knows how to say it, under, I'm just going to say, which comes from Proto-Indo-European, which is a theoretical language, unter. This is a particular root that means between, among, or in the midst of. And we see that, for instance, manifest in Sanskrit, antar, among, between, Latin, inter, between, among, or Greek, entera, which also means intestines. Okay, so actually, understanding doesn't have anything to do with under. It actually means interstanding, to stand in between. And for some weird phonological shifts, it has become understanding in Old English. Okay, so under and understanding is not under, according to the expert philologists. So the Rastas are wrong. They got it wrong. You got it wrong. Right? Okay. Nevertheless, most people get it wrong. Even other learned people. I'm going to show you a couple of quotes here from theology, literary criticism, and sociology, which they all got it wrong. They all got understanding wrong. So in these examples, in these papers, all of these authors put forward the notion of overstanding without recognizing its etymology and without giving respect to the Rastas, without recognizing its the overstanding's coinage was by Rastas. So, for instance, Sullivan maintains that what we usually regard as the modern scientific perspective of understanding, such as Immanuel Kant's Verstand or Max Weber's Verstehen, is in fact better conceptualized as overstanding. The modern reader, all of us, is agentive and places herself above the text, analyzing it, dissecting it, critiquing it, dominating it. Set in motion by the Enlightenment project and modern scientism, Sullivan argues such overstanding leads to a misreading of religious texts, because the modern reader of the Bible stands over the Word of God and thereby finds that its meaning is distorted, problematic, ambiguous, and even nonsensical. A religious, believing reader, however, understands by trusting that God reveals himself in the text entirely and appropriately. Sullivan argues for a theology in which both overstanding and understanding are accepted as valid reading positions. But also in literary criticism, Wayne Booth, a famous literary critic, in 1979 writes an article on overstanding. He suggests that overstanding can tease out the plurality of meanings in a text. The critical reader's agency leads to what he calls an attack on the text, which exposes the text's hidden hegemonic forms and false consciousness. Let me quote Booth here. Understanding works with a narrower domain than I thought, because I must recognize how often I myself insist on deliberate misreading, that is, imposition of my questions, in order to overstand. It is still true that the violations we respect most will be based on the preliminary act of justice and understanding. I know what you want, you words there on the page, and now in my mind, implying, as you do, a community of norms and a sharing of goals. I have attended to you, I understand you, and I hereby repudiate, or correct, or deplore, or explain, or attack you in terms that you had either ignored or had hoped to repress. Similarly, Jonathan Cullard talks about, or he stresses that overstanding is not the same as overinterpretation or misinterpretation. Cullard notes that overstanding asks, quote, not what the work has in mind, but what it forgets, not what it says, but what it takes for granted. Texts are therefore always ambivalent, always available for new evaluations by critical readers, even long after their authors have died. And even in applied sociology, Sykes utilizes Booth's discussion of overstanding to explore silence, absence, and contradictions in narratives of lesbian physical education teachers in Canada. Similar to Sullivan, Sykes deploys both understanding and overstanding to bring about an analytical tension that allows her to, quote, dwell upon the categories of lesbian and heterosexual, how speech and silence operate in spoken narratives, and to discover not only conscious dynamics, but also unconscious processes at play in the way we narrate ourselves into existence. All right, so we are in good company. We misunderstood understanding. The Rastas misunderstood understanding, and that's fine. I think that's cool. We should misunderstand sometimes. We don't always need to know the real meaning of words. We don't always have to look up the etymology of words. We can let feeling. Someone said feeling. Can't remember who it was. We need to let feeling come through, right? How do we feel about a certain word that we use? Okay? And that's what the next bit of the presentation will be, the next 20 minutes or so, and then I'll wrap up. I'm going to play you a song, KRS-One, Sound of the Police. And this video shows images of severe police brutality. So if you don't want to watch this, either step out for a moment, for 4 minutes, or just close your eyes. No, I'm serious. I mean, might be triggering, might be not comfortable for some people. I'm going to play this video just to a bit contextualize what this song is about. This is my first example of overstanding, and I will discuss especially verse 2, which is on your handouts. So there will be one verse, you will listen to it, then the second verse you can read on your handout, and then the third verse, I haven't put that on the handout, but you can just listen to it. So if you need more handouts, hand up. Who needs more handouts? Anyone? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much, Vicky. That's lovely. Hand up, please, so Vicky can see you. Yeah, thank you. So, KRS-One's 1993 song, Sound of the Police. This song was a breakthrough in KRS-One's career, and it is now part of the canon of hip-hop classics. The song's iconic chorus, whoop, whoop, that the sound of the police, whoop, whoop, that the sound of the beast, with its onomatopoeic, high-pitched mimicry of police sirens, is widely known in hip-hop circles and have been cited and sampled numerous times by other hip-hop artists. Together with NWA's 1988 Fuck the Police and Ice-T's 1992 Cop Killer, KRS-One's Sound of the Police emerges in the socio-political context of post-industrial urban America, where police brutality, especially against African-American men, was and continues to be a pressing social issue. The lyrics of these songs echo the rhetoric of black radicalism, and particularly, I guess, the Black Panther Party, in that they suggest that African-American men have no other choice but to defend themselves and their communities against police oppression by all means necessary. All right, I'm going to play the song. Close your eyes if you don't want to see this. KRS-One, who belongs to the Jamaican diaspora in New York City, uses, as you might have heard, both Jamaican English and African American English in his performance of the lyrics, to build a historical continuity between slavery in Jamaica and in the Americas at large, and his own lived experiences of police brutality in New York City in the 1980s and 90s. This we call a chronotopic synchronization, another big word. Chronotope means space-time, and synchronization means to synchronize two things, right? So two spaces, two times are synchronized here. And this begins in lines 1 to 4, when the rapper addresses his audience directly and invites them to do a little linguistic exercise that will open up your eye, line 1. He invites his audience to play around with the word overseer. An overseer was a guard who monitored the exploitative workforce, or workflow rather, on slave plantations and disciplined and punished insubordinate slaves. In line 3, KRS-One suggests that his audience should take the word overseer and repeat it like a sample. Now, by utilizing the notion of the sample or sampling, KRS-One highlights agency in language. In other words, the overstands. The sample is the sampling is the methodology for overstanding here. A sample is a sound snippet, usually taken from an older vinyl record and recorded onto a sampling machine, such as the Archive MPC 2000 that you can see on the picture over here. And it is used for hip-hop music production. This technique allows the music producer to play back a sample and loop it, for example, or modulate it and rearrange it in order to make hip-hop beats, that is, the instrumentals on which the rapper can rap. Most hip-hop beats of the 1980s and 1990s used this sampling technique. When a sample is repeated very quickly, it can sound like something else. As KRS-One demonstrates in lines 5 to 6, repeating the word overseer very quickly like a sample blurs the word's difference to another word, namely officer. The speed of repetition reduces the 4-syllable word overseer to 3 syllables, officer, and triggers, to any linguist, very usual forms of phonological reduction, such as diphthong to monophthong, au to a, and ia to e, and voiced to unvoiced, v to f. In less technical terms, when repeated very quickly, overseer begins to sound like officer, that is, police officer. The rapid repetition creates a phonetic ambivalence that challenges the difference between those two words, which I notate as overseer approximately equal to officer. If you follow KRS-One's hip-hop inspired sampling and blurring, they begin with a new reading of the two words. They begin to overstand police brutality as a continuation of the racist practices of slavery. In the remainder of verse 2, the argument that the difference between the words officer and overseer is phonetically ambivalent is explicitly translated onto the level of meaning or semantics. You need a little clarity, check the similarity, line 8. In lines 9 to 18, KRS-One provides descriptions of how practices of police officers and plantation overseers are similar and de facto equivalent. He ends his verse by claiming that after 400 years of institutional racism, he is left without choices, line 18. So that when he's out on the street, he always ensures he carries a gun that is bigger than the ones the police have, lines 19 to 20. The bigger size of his own gun is the moral of the story. At the end of the day, it all comes down to survival of the fittest in the concrete jungle. The bigger gun thereby works as a metaphor for KRS-One's dream of overturning the historical trauma of surviving slavery. The phonetic blurring accomplished through sampling acts as a linguistic ground for synchronization of two chronotopes, which help KRS-One to make an argument about the historical continuities of racism in the Americas. By challenging the difference of the two words, he sabotages a dominant reading or a hegemonic reading that hegemonic reading is that police brutality against African American men is a fundamentally contemporary and local issue, a dehistoricized peripheral problem that operates on a low scale of importance in the grand scheme of justice and peace that the police provides. In other words, in the hegemonic understanding, instances of police brutality against African American men can be erased to uphold an image of the police as essentially good and necessary as an institution. By attacking the difference of the signifiers, the words, KRS-One situates police brutality within the wider historical context of slavery and thereby unveils the continued institutional injustice against black people in the Americas. Now, as you've been so active in the beginning, I kind of want to skip over the second example because it'll take me 10, 15 minutes and I do want to have half an hour to chat with you. So we're going to skip that second example, I apologize, and move straight into sort of my theory. So this is what I came up with as I was working through the notion of overstanding. So I see that we all know the methodologies. If you write a term paper or you write your PhD or something like that, we need a methodology. It's a section called methodology, right? You lay out all the things that you do, that you did, all the sort of tools that you used, all the statistics, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we know that this is actually, we know about that, right? We know about methodologies in universities. And these methodologies, I think, are based on epistemologies. That is theories. We had that word earlier, right? So someone came up with a theory, Foucault or Bourdieu or something like that, and they came up with a theory that is based on knowledge, epistemes, right? And they made a theory out of that, epistemologies. And that is based on understanding in the sort of Enlightenment way of framing that term, right? Understanding, sort of awake state understanding, right? And the natural sciences, for instance, are very good at this until Einstein. But before Einstein, they were like a bit like, oh yeah, this is a table, right? It is there, it actually exists, right? And we can show the physics and the chemistry and blah, 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 right? So it is sort of how we approach things in sort of our awake state, right? And we think of the scientist who kind of explains everything. But then someone earlier said, talked about feeling, and I think I want to bring back the feeling, right? Because we all misrecognized understanding, didn't we? The word. We didn't know. We did not know the real meaning of understanding. We felt something. Yeah, under must be something to do with under, right? So that is a feeling, right? That is emotion-related overstanding, as we could call it. And I think we need to make space in our methodologies to let the affect or the feeling or the emotion to come into our methodologies. I think a methodology is only half-baked if it is only based on knowledge, if it is only based on epistemic theory. So I think we need to make space for that. And I think the last couple of decades, we have seen an affective turn in the social science, in philosophy, and so on. So people have started to theorize affect, but they go up against, of course, 2,500 years of sort of Western epistemology since the Greeks, right? So we are just beginning to scratch that surface. And there isn't like a right or wrong, there isn't a clear-cut theory of affect, right? But maybe we can start to build one. And we are going into uncharted territory over here. Now, all of that I understand as ontologies. This is a science of being. And outside of that ontology, there's the unknown or the unknowable, the unfeelable, the unsayable, or that what is not, right? And this is, of course, a very sort of metaphysics. I don't know if some of you maybe you study philosophy, you know about metaphysics, right? So this boundary that I've made in purple over here is a boundary between what we can know, what we can feel, and what we can say, and what exists, or what we can sort of conceptualize as existing. All right, I think I'm done. Here are a couple of references, and I would just like to extend my thanks to Cardiff University, ESRC, Wales Doctoral Training Partnership, the University of Hong Kong, and the Open University, and of course UCL and the the Institute for Global Prosperity for inviting me. Much love and respect. Thank you very, very much.